oh, lock up your sons and lock up your daughters because I'm off script. And we all know it's terribly dangerous when I'm off script because I'll just keep waffling on. And I tend to make up words as well that don't exist in the English language, but hey ho. No, this video was already written, scripted, filmed, and edited, sent off for review, and I now decided that I completely wanted to change the direction of the video, so I put my makeup back on and here we go. There's no script to this at all. But really, I just wanted to talk more from the heart about, quite frankly, what I think is the most delightful trend I've seen on social media in a long time, which is the personal curricula trend, which is when people are creating their own personal curriculum and showcasing them, sharing what they're choosing to learn rather than feeling like they're rotting away online. I think it's a delightful, wonderful endeavour, and I'm here for it. I'm here to support anyone for it. But it did get me thinking, quite honestly, about my own journey with self-education, and basically I'm here as a bit of a warning, not really a warning, but I'm sort of the Gollum to your Frodo, you know, do as I say, not as I do, because it made me reflect a lot on all the pitfalls of self-education, because quite frankly, I think a lot of my education has been self-directed for a very long time, particularly since I started my PhD around 4 years ago or so, which is basically entirely a trip on self-education. And there are so many pitfalls that have evolved as technology has evolved, so I thought I'd just do more of a general chat about why I love this trend so much and why I'm so supportive of it, and also give advice from basically my mistakes or things that I think more people need to be aware of in terms of, you know, where they can get extra help, because you know, self-education is fun, but it's also incredibly sticky when you get to parts that you don't really understand or you haven't got an expert there to help you or guide you. So I'm here to hopefully I don't know what I'm saying there. Basically, quash any concerns that you may have in terms of starting your own self-curriculum and encouraging you to do it. I think it's fantastic. So let's talk about the idea that what's trending at the moment. Basically, it seems to be a response to brain rot. I've done a whole video on brain rot a wee time ago, and people are now teaching themselves things. They are resorting to learning new subjects in response to this overwhelming universal feeling that our brains are rotting inside of our skulls thanks to constant screen usage, really. I think I would put it down to, I don't think we can entirely blame social media. I think screens don't really work with engaging with our knowledge realm in our brain, and we tend to feel a bit mushy, particularly when everything online seems to be mushified in terms of context. You know, it's the most digestible, easiest mushy subjects ever. So naturally people are turning away from that. And it got me thinking about how I didn't really engage with the personal curriculum for a long time. I remember when I was at university as an undergraduate and thought to myself, I would say 98% of the stuff that I learned at university were learned by myself in the library, in the university library, and I realised then and there that I was really paying for an incredibly expensive library card. What I really got most out of my education was having access to that beloved library. It was a fantastic library, and same goes for my masters. Even though actually I would say it felt more specialist. My masters was probably far more one-on-one kind of tutorial-ish, because it was heavy-going theoretical stuff that I could never have done by myself. Like, I would never have understood any of that stuff. And to be fair, I still don't most of the time. I'm just rereading my old notes going, what? Really? Did I mean that? Did he mean that? I don't know. But anyway, there are some things that I could never have learned by myself, and there are other things that I could have learned. And I just basically want to talk about the ideas that we have to navigate this space as we get older. Because, you know, it's Aristotle's idea. You know, I mean, obviously Plato and Socrates were always talking about education, but Aristotle definitely talked about lifelong education, and he combined it with Socrates' argument that one should not just learn for knowledge, but also learn about oneself, for democracy, as they were always arguing. Knowledge was in favour of the democracy because you became a better citizen by educating oneself over and over and over again for the rest of your life, because it also made you, you know, wise to critical thinking skills, which made you less susceptible to being fooled, or being persuaded, and having your own convictions, and virtue and wisdom. So that's why the ancient Greeks profited the idea of lifelong education, and I still say the same thing goes today, if not more so. My only wee concern when I was thinking about the whole self-education thing, and not a reflection on not anyone else, but one of the sentences I think many of us make our heart sink ever so slightly is when we are debating someone who is spouting absolute nonsense and they use the term like, well, I've done my own research, and as a massive red flag when you say that. So how can we prevent ourselves from being that red flag person who says they've done their own research, which is, as I've had to remind one of my relatives, reading comments on Facebook does not constitute research. No, it does not. So how do we draw that line? And particularly in a world where education is becoming less and accessible, it is becoming higher fees to get in, and then obviously naturally after that academic texts are incredibly expensive. There are some open source material out there, but there's not much, and when you are on a self-educating journey you will find that a lot of the mass market text after a while becomes slightly derivative when you cover that topic over and over and over again, or become a little bit too simplistic for your current understanding. So where do you progress from there, and how can you're doing a good job in educating yourself and not becoming one of those red flag people who said I've done my own research? Because even then there are limits to where you get your resources from, and that includes myself as a content creator. Using online resources, always take it with a grain of salt, because people can make mistakes or things can become outdated. So really dealing with primary material yourself is the first and foremost top quality thing. Dealing with secondary resources like myself or other creators out there is a great first step in the door to inspire you, hopefully, to help you engage with the topic in some way. But I always say do not rely on secondary resources, and that includes documentaries. Documentaries can be far, but they are, first and foremost, like content like this, it is entertainment rather than education. But I should ask you a question. Have you ever wished that you could learn directly from the best in the world? Well, with today's sponsor, Masterclass, your wish is granted. Masterclass has unlimited access to over 200 classes taught by experts in everything from writing and business to cooking, science and wellness, all for just $10 a month billed annually. As you're currently watching a video about designing your own learning journey, I'd highly recommend James Clear's class, Small Habits That Make a Big Impact on Life. As that name may ring a bell, James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits, and his lessons are all about building small, consistent habits that actually stick, which is essential if you're creating a sustainable curriculum for yourself that is led and motivated entirely by yourself. I read Atomic Habits years ago, but I'm an auditory learner first and foremost, and lucky for me, Masterclass has an audio-only mode that let me listen to his class like a podcast. Revisiting the principles of the book from the author himself felt like a whole new enlightening experience, and I'm actually really excited to get working again next year on my academic journey. Masterclass lets you stream their classes anytime, anywhere, at your own pace. And if you're offline, you can download select classes to watch later. So if you're going on a long journey, on a train or a bus, you can watch them there. And new classes drop every month, so there's always something new to explore. So whether you've got 10 minutes or an entire afternoon, you can turn spare moments into progress and swap mindless scrolling for something that actually helps. During the holiday season, you can get up to 50% off an annual Masterclass subscription. Just click the link in the video description box down below or scan the QR code on the screen and let them know that I sent you. Learn from the world's best to become your best with Masterclass. Thank you so much, Masterclass, for sponsoring today's video, and let's carry on with our discussion. One of the biggest pitfalls, I think, when it comes to self-education is motivation and feeling completely lost. For the past few years, I felt terribly lost. If anyone's unfamiliar with how a UK PhD process works, you're on your own, child. You don't have lectures or seminars, you don't have classes, you don't have coursework, you have a topic and you're sent away to go do your own stuff. Goodbye, farewell, no reading list. I had to tell my aunt this recently, and aunt was asking me if I'd read my reading list. I was like, you do know no one's given me a reading list, don't you? She was like, what? I'm like, no, I'm on my own. And on top of that, I also don't live in the same country as my university, so therefore do not have access to the wonderful library of my university. It's magnificent, that library, purely for its content. The building is clumsy. But anyway, so there are a lot of hurdles, but I'm still in a great privileged position. You know, I have access to online academic material, which is life-saving. I also have access to a national library and an academic library, of which many people don't have access to. But that doesn't mean you can't get access to it. If you live in a university city or near a university city, by all means reach out to their university library and see if they have public member access. You probably have to pay an annual fee to access the university library, but it is by far one of the greatest investments you can ever do. I cannot recommend libraries enough. Academic libraries, national libraries, but also your local library. So say you don't have like a big fancy library, you've only got a small town library that's completely underfunded and it's incredibly small, still ask, because they may have access to interlibrary networks, which allows for them to request books from other libraries that are more well funded, and then they can send that book over to the small town library, and that probably having more footfall like that would help your local library. I'm not sure all libraries can. I know my local libraries can, but also there's a limitation to what a local library system may have in terms of academic material, but you never know. Another thing I always encourage people, first and foremost, is to contact institutions. Contact museums, contact, galleries, whatever your research is. It could be a science museum, it could be, a historical museum, a natural history museum, whatever your interest may be, if you get stuck in anything. Whilst museum curators are incredibly busy people, they will have a lot of experts working on site, and your email will very much likely get noticed and passed on to someone who either knows the answer for you or will have access to resources that they can send you or list you or recommend to you. We live in this glorious, magnificent technological world, which I know I'm always particularly looking negative on it, but we have this wonderful thing, email. You can email any museum or gallery or any national institution in the world and they may reply to you. Every time I've had to email a museum, all of which have been museums across Europe for me, I've always got an email back within a few weeks, and they're not just a general, email. They've given me in-depth links to things. They give me access to PDF files that they have. They give me access to their own documentation that may help me in my inquiry. It's incredible, and I say that squeaked. My little thing squeaked. If you heard that, I'm sorry. But basically, ask museums around the world. You are not limited to your local museums around the world. It may take a couple of weeks for them to reply. They may not reply at all. But the more museums or galleries or institutions that you contact to ask for help, the more familiar you will become with those which will reply to you on a regular basis, and you may become first name contacts with someone who will always help you, because there will always be usually an expert somewhere who has the time to give. A lot of people are busy. I wouldn't say put your faith in contacting an academic at a university because they are incredibly busy, but more in terms of people who are working in private or public national institutions. They are more than happy to help. Hello. This is why I normally have a script. I realised that I started this conversation talking about motivation and I trailed off like no one's business, and this is why we're returning back to that concept, which is motivation. It's incredibly hard when you don't have anyone to hold you accountable, you don't have any deadlines, you don't have anyone to ask for support, and that I think is the stickiest part of self-education journey. Because really, even when you're a PhD student, you're sort of, go on, if you want to pass, you have to do it yourself kind of thing. And there's a real paradox when you want to explore freely, but also you need structure in life, particularly if you're neurodivergent like myself. I thrived in a school or university sort of curriculum environment where I had this at this time and this at this time, and I followed it to a T. Turns out that I don't believe myself if I give myself my own timetable. I don't follow it. I think I need an authority to cast it for me, because I evidently don't respect myself enough to do so. It always drifts off. Please, again, don't be like me, or you'll end up in complete burnout, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But if you are a better person than I am, I highly recommend giving yourself a timetable for whenever you're able to work on your personal curriculum. So whether that's at the weekends or evenings, or, varied depending on your workload. Like, say you work in retail and you have no idea what days of the week you have free, try and create yourself a little schedule that you can keep to, with like just an hour a day on this, an hour a day on that, and work your way up. Honestly, I used to find doing study with me videos incredibly helpful because I felt less alone when I was working. Unfortunately, because I have two little dogs that bark spontaneously throughout the day, I always felt a little self-conscious about doing a study with me, because I felt like I was disturbing people with my dogs barking. Maybe that's something that I can return to in the future. But if you can find a study with me video, I think you may find that beneficial. Also, working in a library if you're able to. I find working in a library far more conducive to productivity. But again, because I have two little dogs at home by themselves, I can't leave them for very long, and my nearest library is an hour bus drive away, so it's not exactly like I can go for a long period of time because the little dogs will be by themselves. Another thing I thought about recommending in this video is how you're approaching your personal curriculum. A lot of people may pick a subject, like they may pick it in terms of a degree. So say they want to learn biology or English literature. I'm going to focus on English literature because that's my forte. And I think that's too broad, which may be a little bit overwhelming for people. And again, for your personal sake, how your brain works and also how your interests are, I think also it doesn't really do you a service. However, if you consider doing thematic learning, you may get more out of your personal curriculum. So for example, English literature is far too broad, so ask yourself what type of authors or writing you're really interested in reading about, or genre. So say you're someone who's really interested in black women writers, or black authors, or working class authors, or horror. And horror is a really good example, actually, because you can then create subcategories from your main core interest. So with horror, you can break it down into gothic horror, southern gothic horror, black women writers horror, black author horror, women writer horror, translated horror, horror films, horror game scripts, horror theatre productions, which then obviously gives you a range of avenues to explore your subject in depth, and it's so catered to you. And through exploring a genre that you perhaps wouldn't be interested in originally, like say, horror theatre, or horror games, you may actually find a really strong interest in it. And allowing yourself to diversify which mediums you're exploring within your theme would allow you to then employ interdisciplinary approaches to things. So you may then find you're interested in feminism, or you may find that you're interested in postmodernism, or even exploring art history, or theatre studies, or film studies, or philosophy. You don't know where your avenues will go, but if you stick by a theme, you may find you'll get more out of it, rather than just a generic, I'm going to read Victorian literature and modernist literature, and I'm also going to read Chaucer, and I'm going to read Shakespeare. You may not find that as fulfilling for you as just focusing on whatever the heck you're actually really interested in, and making a curriculum out of your already existing interests. Because again, really, the importance is to do things that interest you. You don't want to do things for the sake of being able to, perform being more intelligent in some way. You don't want to study subjects or read books just so you said that you could have read them to other people and sound more impressive. Really, you'll get more out of it in a personal curriculum if you just do things you enjoy and really focus on the areas that you find that you're passionate about and that you enjoy talking about with other people, and you'll find your field in that. And then once you feel like you've exhausted that, you can move on to another area and explore that. But I suppose that does lead me on to the burnout, where I am the Gollum to your Frodo. Like, I don't want anyone to become ill and in a dangerous situation, either mentally or physically, because they have burned themselves out. And, it's a very noble pursuit, self-education, but it can also become a form of self-punishment, particularly if you start using how many books you've read as a metric, or how long you studied, and then you become in a shame spiral where you can't really get out of it. And it can also make you dislike your subject, which is the worst thing that could possibly happen, because we don't want that to happen at all. And I speak as someone who's been suffering from the physical and mental fallout of extreme burnout that has made me incredibly ill and incredibly unhappy, and there is no cure, or the curing process is incredibly long and exhausting in and of itself, don't do that. Please don't push yourself to burnout. It's really not worth it. You'll feel far more unproductive if you burn out. It's much harder to recover from than I realised, and it's my biggest regret. So I think it's where I'm not giving a warning in terms of like, don't do this. It's more just kind advice, like just a word of kindness, that I want you to take care of yourself, because really our minds are like libraries in of themselves, and they require quiet. Real education happens in moments of reflection, and moments of pause, and allowing the dust to settle and to walk away a wee bit, and then coming back to it and revisiting it like a friend, rather than exhausting your friend's time and the two of you ending up hating each other because you just haven't been apart. It can become incredibly toxic if you are incredibly in love with it, and you want to be the best in terms of yourself, not even like other people, in terms of like, I want to know all about this and I want to know all about that and I want to learn all about this, and it can become incredibly overwhelming to the point that you don't really know where to start anymore, and that in of itself can become its own barrier to entry because you don't know where to start. So really, that's why I think a theme would be fun. If you pick a theme, and then you pick one book in that theme, and then try and choose another leeway out of that book. Or you may say, actually, I hated everything about that book. I don't want to go down this avenue ever again. I don't know, maybe your thing was ancient pottery, and you decided, nope, I don't want to learn anything more about ancient pottery. And there's very few people who do. And you don't have to be that person. I say that as someone who's related to someone who specialises in ancient pottery. It's not a dig. It's not a dig. It's just funny because I don't do it anymore. And again, those type of, when you do something to death, we've all learned from school, a lot of people don't read books because they feel like school ruined it for them. And it can become the same thing. But what's, I think, the most fascinating thing I've learned from the whole self-education in terms of my own PhD is that I thought I'd be getting smarter, and I thought it was difficult because I'd be handling difficult information, and the most difficult thing is being myself. The most difficult thing has just been purely all the not metrics, but rather just how you function as a human being when you're learning a lot of information, and how you then, what you do with that information and how you manage that information. And that in of itself has been the hardest part, but it also teaches you a lot about yourself, which I'm sure Socrates would be very happy with. I've learned a lot about myself, and it turns out I don't like myself. But self-education isn't always about what you learn and filling your mind, because no one, with all due respect, there's nothing more boring than someone who just like word vomits out everything they know about this subject. Just all the information. It's so incredibly tedious. What really it's all about is sort of meeting yourself and finding where you fit in, not just the world today, but the world of literature and the world of science and the world of philosophy and the world of mathematics or the world of music, or the world of crafting. Wherever you fit yourself in, you suddenly go, oh, I'm part of a thing. I'm part of something greater than myself. I'm suddenly part of understanding the past and the present and the people who've studied this before me and the people who've created this and the people who laid this groundwork. And you suddenly fit into a tapestry that you weren't really aware that you could thread into until you start learning. So yes, that's my rambling thoughts about self-education and the what do you call it? Personal curriculum idea. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to, because I don't have a script, I normally have all my Patreons at the end. So I'm going to clip in the old video of me thanking all my Patreons. Because I haven't got the names in front of me. My apologies. Thank you as always for watching, I really appreciate it. But most importantly, thank you to my Patreons, my wonderful Patreons, for supporting me yet another month. I really appreciate it. And thank you to my librarians. We have 2 new librarians. We have Lacey Grindstaff, thank you so much for joining. And Joshua Heredia, thank you also so much for joining. We have Gil the Gilded Dragon, Fox Goblin 666. I do love saying that name. Lady of the Labyrinth, Eric Taylor, Ellen, Yvonne and Yvonne, Jenny Edivane, Marina, Wee Laura's, Nicholas Reed, and Andrea Bazil. Thank you so much, as always, for being my top tier librarians. I really appreciate you all. And now it's back to personal me. So thank you as always for watching. I hope you liked it, followed it. I know the trouble is when I'm not scripted, I speak much quicker. May I introduce you to the speed controls in YouTube? They can slow down this ADHD girl. But thank you as so much for watching, and I hope you are happy and healthy. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.